These planes were a very good example of the early 1930s French bomber designs, when aerodynamics and speed were not primary factors. Instead, the bombers were imagined as flying fortresses defending themselves with several gun positions. As a result, they became obsolete by the time World War II broke out, but they still served in the early phase of the war. These were the Bloch MB.200 bombers. So let's see the history of these aircraft today. The years after the First World War were an interesting time for aircraft designs. As though new technologies were constantly used by the manufacturers, the peacetime evolution was much slower than during the Great War. And it stayed like that until the mid-1930s, when a new arms race began, reigniting the use of new ideas in aviation technology. Because of that, many designs developed in the early 1930s were completed just before the new technological advances, such as more powerful engines and better understanding of aerodynamics, were available. This led to the interesting French designs developed in this period of time. Just like other European powers, the French also started to modernize their forces in the early 1930s as an answer to the events in Germany. As a part of the modernization program, in 1932, the Air Ministry announced new specifications for a new 5-seat night bomber to replace the aging Leo-20 biplanes. The specifications asked for a 5-man crew, around 1,200 kilograms of bomb load, and at least 1,000 kilometers range. The Bloch company started to work on a new plane for the specifications. Their plans were in line with the French aircraft design trends of the time, with flat sides, a high-wing monoplane construction, fixed undercarriage, and several gun positions mounting 7.5mm machine guns. The bomber used two Morane-14 KDRS engines, each of them producing 770 horsepower. The Bloch design, of course, was not the only one proposed for the new specifications. Many French manufacturers were interested and hoped to receive big military contracts. Some of the proposed designs were the Leo 300 and 301 models, the Poitiers P41 design, the Bordelais AB20, the Farman 220 and 221, and of course the topic of our video, the Bloch MB.200. After the Air Ministry reviewed the proposals, the Bloch and Farman designs were chosen as winners, though in the end the two bombers were used for different combat roles. I have already made a separate video about the Farman 220 model, so if you're interested in the history of that aircraft, check it out. The first prototype of the Bloch MB.200 made its maiden flight in mid-1933. Because of its very blocky design and bad aerodynamics, its maximum speed was below the requirements. But at that time, speed was not considered to be the most important factor for a night bomber, so the test flights were considered successful. On the prototype, some of the gun positions were still open ones, again in line with other designs of the time. The Air Ministry in January 1934 already placed an order for 30 units of these bombers, and because of its simple design, the production of the type was set up fairly quickly. Because Bloch at the time didn't have the capacity for mass production, the Poitiers company received the order. The first production model already made its maiden flight in July 1934, and these models started to enter service at the end of the year, just about 18 months after the first flight of the prototype. The production models now featured enclosed gun positions and received all the necessary military equipment. But the first experiences with the MB.200 revealed some problems. The wings needed reinforcement, the landing gear also proved to be too weak and prone to crack, and the engine suffered from heavy vibrations, which was fixed using different mounts and shock absorbers. Even before the type entered service, new orders followed the first one, and by mid-1935 the number of planes ordered from the type exceeded 200 units. By the end of 1935, 12 squadrons were equipped with these bombers. The pilots and crews liked these planes because they were reliable and easy to fly, though they had fairly bad maneuverability and they were very slow. With the added military equipment, the top speed was reduced to just 285 km an hour. During production, the bombers received several upgrades as well. The original 770 horsepower engines were replaced with 900 horsepower Morane-14 KIRS power plants, which allowed the bomb load to be increased to 1400 kilograms, without sacrificing any performance. Smaller bombs up to 100 kilograms could be carried in the bomb bay, and larger ones up to 500 kilograms on outside bomb racks. There were also several experimental variants tested with different engine types to improve performance. but these never made it further than the prototype phase. The MB.201 used two Hispano-Suiza 12 engines. The MB.202 model featured 4 of the Morane 7K DRS power plants, and the MB.203 was tested with the Clerget 14F diesel engines. By the time the MB.200 entered service, Bloch already worked on an improved variant of the type, which featured a more advanced design than the original bomber, but not by much. The MB.210 model had a longer fuselage. Unlike its predecessor, this variant was a low-wing monoplane, and to improve on its aerodynamics, it also featured a retractable undercarriage and retractable gun positions. We will also look at this model in a future video. The MB.200 was 16 meters long, with a wingspan of 22.45 meters, roughly the same size as the later B-25 bomber. It had an empty weight of 4,300 kilograms and a maximum takeoff weight of 7,480 kilograms. The bomber was powered by two Morane 14-cylinder radial air-cooled engines, each of them producing 900 horsepower. With these engines, the aircraft was quite underpowered. It could only reach 285 km an hour top speed. It had a range of 1,000 km and a service ceiling of 8,000 meters. It had the usual defensive weapons used on most French bombers at the time, including 3 7.5mm machine guns, one in the nose, one in the ventral, and one in the dorsal positions. And it could carry 1,200 kilograms of bombs. The first MB.200 bombers entered service at the end of 1934. In 1936, the bombers flew their first combat mission in the Spanish Civil War. The first 2 units were airlifted there, and later additional 30 bombers were delivered by ship and assembled in Spain. Though only being in service for less than 2 years, these missions already showed how obsolete these bombers were, and approximately 1/3 of them were shot down in a few months. By the start of World War II, the French Air Force still used 169 of these bombers. By this time, the modernized MB.210 already entered service, but they didn't replace their predecessors. The bombers flew missions both in Europe and on the colonies, and many of them were lost, especially when they flew without fighter cover. The big and slow aircraft was an easy prey for the Axis fighters. By the time the Battle of France began, only 22 of them were in frontline duty, and even those were relegated to transport roles. The rest were sent to flight schools to participate in training. After the fall of France, some of them were still used by the Vichy government, mostly as transport aircraft on the colonies. The type was also used by Czechoslovakia, who acquired a license in 1935, and the production began in 1937 at the Avia and Aero factories. They built 124 units altogether. After the occupation of the country, these bombers were taken over by the German forces, who used them for training, and some of them were passed on to Romania, Bulgaria, and Croatia. The bombers were used until 1941, when they flew their last combat mission in Africa, used by the Vichy government against the British. The Bloch MB.200 bombers were developed just before the aviation technologies gone through a big evolution in the mid-1930s, and that made them obsolete even before World War II started. But maybe this fact and their unique looks are the things that makes them an interesting part of the aviation history. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and in the comments let me know if there's any interesting events or vehicles you'd like to see.